Hey guys, and welcome to Anchor to Truth. Today we are diving into chapter 33 in the book of Jubilees. So let's get started.
All right, guys, let's pick it up in verse 1. And Jacob went and dwelt to the south of Magda, Lordareth, and he went to his father Isaac, he and Leah his wife, and on the new moon of the 10th month, and Reuben saw Bilhah, Rachel's maid, the concubine of his father, bathing in water in a secret place, and he loved her. And he hid himself at night, and he entered the house of Bilhah at night, and he found her sleeping alone on a bed in her house. And he lay with her, and she awoke and saw, and behold, Reuben was lying with her in the bed. And she uncovered the border of her covering, and seized him, and cried out, and discovered that it was Reuben. And she was ashamed because of him, and released her hand from him, and he fled. And she lamented because of this thing exceedingly, and did not tell it to anyone. And when Jacob returned and sought her, she said unto him, I am not clean for thee, for I have been defiled as regards thee. For Reuben hath defiled me, and hath lain with me in the night, and I was asleep, and did not discover until he uncovered my skirt, and slept with me. And Jacob was exceedingly wroth with Reuben, because he had lain with Bilhah, because he had uncovered his father's skirt. And Jacob did not approach her again, because Reuben had defiled her. And as for any man who uncovereth his father's skirt, his deed is wicked exceedingly, for it is an abominable before Yahuwah. For this reason it is written and ordained on the heavenly tables that a man should not lie with his father's wife, and should not uncover his father's skirt, for this is unclean. They shall surely die together, the man who lieth with his father's wife, and the woman also, for they have wrought uncleanness on the earth. And there shall be nothing unclean before our Elohim in the nations which he hath chosen for himself as a possession. And again it is written a second time, Cursed he be who lieth with the wife of his father, for he has uncovered his father's shame. And all the holy ones of Yahuwah said, So be it, so be it. Wow.
Had to get written down a second time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so the very first thing I have highlighted up here is in verse 2. It says the concubine of his father. Now we've already been through this, where he actually took these maids to be his wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to point this out because I thought this was really interesting that we have this idea, this term over here being used as concubine of his father, but we know we know the maids that he took to be his wife, that they became his wife, and that all these things that are coming about is that son should not lay with his father's wife, right? Anyway, what I'm getting at is when we read about concubines in scriptures, it's kind of, I don't know, there's like this idea that concubine almost means like sex slave or prostitute, or just someone who's there for that purpose and that purpose only, right? But that's not the context of what's going on here. So we have this individual being called a concubine, but we know that she is an actual wife, right? So anyway, I just thought that was interesting to bring up. Think about Solomon, right? How many concubines did he have? Those were literal wives. He took care of their households. He took care of them financially and however else.
Right.
So anyway, interesting.
I kind of wonder, because it's Reuben, it's not Reuben talking, but it's saying, and then Reuben saw Bilhah, Rachel's handmaid, the concubine. I wonder if this is like from his perspective, if he's trying to almost use those deceiving words. He's like, oh, but it's not my father's wife, it's my father's concubine. Maybe this will help my case a little bit, so that way I'm not so, it's not so overtly bad. I wonder if that's why word was chosen there, because I mean, we do see in other places it definitely says wife. You know what I mean? So I just wonder why the change in word, unless it was just him trying to justify maybe. But either way, it was wrong and not okay. And she didn't change any status, to Jacob up until this point, apparently.
Yeah, the other thing I want to point out, guys, at the very beginning of this, you see though that Reuben he's already kind of plotting this. So I think he understands. We go back right there. You've got it. Number 2, it says, and Reuben saw Bilhah, Rachel's maid, the concubine of his father, bathing in a secret place. So it's supposed to be a place like, hey, by the way, you know they have to bathe. You know that this is probably the place they're doing it. So in all likelihood, you knew what you were doing. You went to that secret place so you could see them uncovered or see her uncovered. And it says, and he loved her, you know, so he's developed feelings, this emotional attachment to her. And, you know, so the whole thing, you know, from the very beginning, we know this wasn't an accident that he accidentally saw her, that I just so happened to be in the neighborhood, so to speak. But you see again in verse 3 there, it says, and he hid himself at night. And then he entered the house of Bilhah at night, and he found her sleeping alone on a bed in her house.
Right.
So, yeah, so for Reuben, this doesn't look good for you, brother. This isn't an accidental. This isn't we had too much to drink. This isn't, you know, anything that, you know, oh my God, what happened? We woke up with each other. This is you literally planned this entire thing out. So I think that's part of the wickedness of this, is that you know who she is. You know exactly where they're bathing. You know exactly where she lives, and you pursued this, and it's an unholy act.
Yeah, one of the things I considered going through it was, and again, I know in no way am I justifying anything, but like Reuben's being the oldest, and generally the handmaids, or you know, the helpers for the two sisters, Rachel and Leah, would be the younger of the bunch. You know, they're like the up and coming. They're the, you know, hey, go help the wives out. So I wonder, like in that situation, like how close in age were they? You know, it wasn't like, oh, I'm, you know, looking at one of my mom figures that's 18 plus years older than I am. Like they could have been 12 years, you know, by the time they had their kids, they were later on down the path. You know, Leah has the first kid, and then like it's way later before the handmaids start really coming into play. So, and if the handmaids are a lot younger, and again, not trying to say that it's okay, but I wonder if that's kind of why he had that attachment in the first place. Was, hey, this is kind of like we're like the same age. We're 4 years apart. You know, dad's got these young ladies in here, plus the, you know, the older wives. Like, I don't know, I kind of fancy, you know, and not, again, not that it makes it right at all, but I do wonder if that plays a factor at all, because he's the oldest and they might have been younger, that they're in the same age gap, the same pool of dating people. You know, they would have been, if they were both single, they would have been in each other's life anyway, but they weren't single. That was the problem.
Well, I don't know. They were already married and had been for a while, at least long enough for him to become of age for all this to take place.
Right.
I don't know. I'm not thinking that they were so young. Anyway, I don't know. Yeah, I don't think that they were that young. Maybe we can look into that. If y'all have any thoughts on that, please let us know in the comments. I'm thinking there's probably you know, at least a 15 to 20 year difference in age. That's my thought. But then again, how old are they at this point? Because if, you know, if he's 30 and she's 50, you know, I don't know. Just a thought.
So I do want to share a scripture with you guys. I think that kind of is fitting for this. When you go to James, Jonathan's favorite book in the Bible.
That's right.
It's James chapter 1, verse 15 says in the ESV, so we're going to stick with that. It says, then desire, when it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. So we're seeing with Reuben and what he's doing here, his desire became fully conceived. And because of that, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is fully grown, it brings forth death. And so we're seeing that, you know, and this is something that we can look at Reuben and go, oh, bad person, blah, 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 blah. But at the same time, how many times have we allowed ourselves to be in a compromising position? How many times have we allowed ourselves to be somewhere we shouldn't be? How many times has sin literally crept at the door, as when the father was speaking to Cain? He's like, hey, Cain, what's up? I don't see your brother Abel anywhere. He's like, hey, my brother's keeper. And he's like, hey, by the way, sin's crouching at your door. You know, before they even have that conversation, God already sees before he takes his brother out. The father's trying to have this conversation with Cain, going, hey, man, by the way, there's something going on in your brain. I know what's going on. And when this fully comes to be about, sin is literally right there and it's waiting on you. So, hey, what you need to do is go ahead and next time bring a proper offering, and that is acceptable to me, and we're good. But instead, he takes that and he places it upon his brother out of jealousy, and he ends up killing his brother. And so the words of the father come to be. He's like, hey, sin's right there. Same thing with Reuben. Reuben, if he would have been warned ahead of time, hey, Reuben, I see what you're doing, and it's not a good thing, brother. It's not a good look. And sin is literally crouching at the door for you, and you don't need to do this. But for him, it came to be, and the sin and then the consequences thereof.
Yeah. I definitely had that thought going through that. Is just that, you looked, you saw, you acted, and that, the action is what, where the sin comes in. Same thing, very similar story with David, like watching the baths and being a guy doing that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when David should have been out with the men at wartime, David was up on walking the top. And I'm gonna just be honest. I don't think it's just by happen chance he saw Bathsheba. I think this was something like he knew. He kind of like, well, that time of that, I don't know how often they bathe, but in his mind, it might have been like, I kind of caught my eye one time, but I looked away. But hey, let's go see if she's out there. I don't know. But you see what happened there, that it became something. James chapter 1, verse 15, exactly what happened to David, King David. Sin was there, crouching at the door when it was fully conceived. And literally the death part of this was that your firstborn son by her, the father took. So there was a literal sense in the physical part of the death here. And so again, we see that playing out here with the consequences that Reuben's going to receive. And this is going to be a curse under Reuben, to where he is the firstborn, but you're not going to see a lot of good things because of this. You're not going to see that blessing that he should have gotten down the road, I think, from his father. When he does give out all the blessings, this is not going to be a good thing for him.
Hey, Joe, was her name originally Sheba, and after that incident, she became Bathsheba?
Do I need to do the
All right. Before we get too far down the road here, let's pull this up. So that unpronounceable word up here, Magdaladra F. This one up here. Yeah.
You did great.
That would be a great name for an NFL football player, since they got all those names right across the shoulder pads.
A compound of Migdal, Eder, Ephrath, the Tower of Eder of Ephrath. Genesis 35:21, also Testament of Reuben 3, verses 9 through 15, where the same incident is narrated. All right, so let's talk about the elephant in the room here, and we're not going to get too graphic here, but verse 4, and he lay with her, and she awoke and saw. So we've got her awaking and seeing. And then we've got the whole story being told. I was asleep and did not discover until he uncovered my skirt and slept with me. So she's a hard sleeper. Or what do we think about this? Do we think that there's maybe some stretching of the truth going on here? What do we think, guys?
Well, I think we have the option for a little bit of both, but in reality, I think that in that time, just like when we read in verse 7, and when Jacob returned, he sought her, right? So it's like that was like kind of the thing to do. He's like, when the man came back around, he wanted to spend time with his wife. So it wouldn't have been outside the norm for her to be like, oh, I'm hanging out, it's bedtime, I brushed my hair, I'm just having a good night, and oh, husband came in, well, it's time to do that thing, and it's not like they have the lamp on the corner of the bed, or they have the, you can turn all the lights on. It's, hey, it's the guy. I've only ever been with one guy. There's only one guy who ever been in this room. So I'm not going to think anything of it. I'm not going to go down this long rabbit trail of, oh, this is deception and so-and-so snuck in and this thing. She's like, okay, hey, the husband wants to spend some time with me. Let's spend some time together. And they spent time together. And then they probably just went to sleep. It very much could have been just that was the expectation. That was the norm. Hey, Jacob's coming by this day or whatever. He's spending this day with me. So she would have been happy and excited that, hey, I get to spend time with the husband. And there couldn't have been any. There doesn't have to be foul play on her end. I mean, we know for sure with Reuben, like we already talked about it. He was going out of his way to commit the act, but on her part, she could have just been like, hey, it's the husband coming in from the field, and he wants to get warm tonight, and then we woke up in the morning. That's not him. And so we have to kind of leave something to keep this ambiguous. You know, it's the same story with Jacob and Leah, right? Like, how do you not know? It's almost like in our world today, we just don't understand how that's even possible. Look at Lot and his 2 daughters, right? Like, how do you keep on getting in these scenarios where you're like, I had no idea. There's something else going on with these stories where you're like,
Right.
there's not the option to know, or there is some ability that they're like, or at the end of the day, they were just like, hey, it happened and I wasn't going to fight it. You know, I don't know, but there's too many times this is happening where people just like the brain turns off, or it's just they didn't have any means of knowing any better. It just, this is normal life for us and we just got warm tonight and I don't know. Then I woke up and found out this wasn't what I thought it was.
I don't know. You know, it does say that she lamented because of this thing exceedingly and did not tell it to anyone. And when Jacob returned, she said, you know, hey, I'm not clean for you, for I've been defiled. So it seems like she's trying to do the right thing, at least after the fact, regardless of what the during the act was all about.
Right.
So I like to think that that this story is being told and with accuracy, that this was the situation, this is the way it played out. But we're hearing about a he said, she said kind of situation here, but we still have to remember that this story is being told, it's being handed down to Moses from the angel.
Yep.
So
and I think the fact that she didn't say anything, you know, like even in our modern world, you know, a lot of times when something bad happens like that, you tend to clam up and say, I don't want anybody to know about this and I feel bad about it and I don't really want to talk about it. I don't want to bring it back up. You know, it was bad enough in the moment. And I think maybe, you know, part of it is our modern world over fantasized version of marriage engagement. You know, we think it's all this super movie stuff. It's all Hollywood, you know, and in reality, most of life, and especially back then, there isn't the Hollywood. There's no bubble bath. There's no roses on the bed. You know, I mean, it was just, hey, I like you, you like me. It's that time. All right, we'll see you in the morning. And I don't mean to, you know, belittle the situation at all, but I mean, it was just a part of everyday life. It wasn't this like super, you know, Hollywood, not, I don't want to call it nonsense, but over dramatized, you know, version. So it easily could have been, you know, said just in the heat of the moment kind of thing. Everybody was just saying okay, and then, oh, this was not what I signed up for.
Right. I get that. Well, what about 9 where it says, and Jacob did not approach her again? So does that mean like forever?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so also.
Yeah.
That's my understanding.
Which is super sad for her. I mean, you know, Reuben gets to go on and live his life and kind of keep going on and doing Reuben stuff. And she's just like, I didn't even do nothing wrong, technically. I mean, yeah, it happened, but I mean, what do you want me to do? Like, now I'm just cut out the deal? So, I mean, it kind of gives us that indication. Like sometimes, you know, sin is sin and it's permanent. You know, we got to deal with that.
So I want to kind of change gears just a little bit here. You know, you're going back and not disagreeing with you as far as the wife situation of her being a wife, but there is an interesting play on words here, from verse 9 all the way down to 10, verse 9 and 10, I believe it is. And it says in 9, it said, and Jacob did not approach her again, it's like you just said, because Reuben had defiled her. And as for any man who uncovereth his father's skirt, his deed is wicked exceedingly, for he is abominable before Yahuwah. For this reason, verse 10, it says, it is written, ordained on the heavenly tables, that a man should not lie with his father's wife, and should not uncover his father's skirt. For this is unclean. They shall surely die together, the man who lieth with his father's wife, and the woman. Also, for they have wrought uncleanness on the earth, and there shall be nothing unclean before our Elohim in the nations which he hath chosen for himself as a possession. So it seems like this uncovering. So I'm not saying she's not a wife, but there is something here is delineating between the fact that we have the wife, then we have concubine, or it seems like you're using the word skirt, the father's skirt. That's 2 different things. So I think maybe go back to the you know, the one being the wife, like she's the main wife. Like Leah is the main wife. Leah gets to be buried with Jacob when they're both passed away. They're in the same grave or the same tomb together. Whereas, not saying these women don't have the rights of a wife, I guess, so to speak, but it is being very distinct here between a concubine and a wife.
Well, I mean, I can appreciate that, and I can see that that's definitely an option here. I mean, if you look on the page, I mean, I do have it highlighted. The two different things here in verse 10, it says that a man should not lie with his father's wife, and then a different color, and should not uncover his father's skirt. So I do see a distinction between these two things. I don't know that that this is specifically saying if this is a distinction between wife and concubine. I almost see this as more of a thing like not only should you not be having physical relations with her, but you shouldn't be looking at what's underneath the skirt in the first place, like the whole spying on her in the water situation.
Oh yeah,
right. So that's kind of what I'm seeing there. Like you shouldn't be, going to see this woman in the bear kind of situation. So I don't know. I mean, and I'm open to other options as well. So I'm curious what you guys think. I still see this, even if this concubine was given, even if this concubine is his wife for the sake of bearing children, she still is a wife that is being
yes,
taken care of and is being treated as a wife, has her own house, right? Like she is provided for all of this stuff. She's been taken, she is treated as if she is a wife. Otherwise, we have to look at all the children that the concubines produced and say that they are all, bastard children.
right. And that's not where I was going. What I'm saying is I think that there is a distinction between the head wife. Let's put it this way: when we had King David had what 200 plus concubines. Guess what? 200 of those concubines aren't sitting next to him on the throne. They're not the ones giving him legal advice or the ones that he's talking with about things, behind closed doors.
Right.
For him, it was Bathsheba was, one of the main women that had any say. And she's the one next to him on his deathbed telling her, matter of fact, your son Solomon, I promised you he would be king and he's going to be king, even though my other son's out there marching up and down the street with the band playing, doing his own inaugurational thing out there. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is not that they're not as a husband and wife, but I think there's a distinction here between the wife and those a concubine has a specific purpose as well. So I think that's why there's both of them are put in here as far as for the concubine and for the wife. He's still a husband to this woman, that's for sure. He's taking care of her. He's given her a house. She still has, I'm sure, legal rights to whatever. But I just think that there is a distinction here. The reason why it's written out. That's just my opinion.
Well, the interesting thing is, just to kind of, give that third opinion and to broach some of that is, I can see it both ways. The way the language is written, the way the English is here in front of us, you have comma and is second, number two, or in addition to. So it does delineate a second idea, thought, or concept. So it very much could be that case, or it could be like Kyle was saying, which, that has a really good point to it as well, is like, hey, don't be in relation with her, but then definitely don't sleep with her. Don't have the full blown thing, but don't get close. Don't be weird. Don't be in her bedroom. Don't be, treat these people with respect and let there be a separation of proper family and proper relationships. Your brother and sister, you can play around with, you can kid around with. You don't play around and kid around with your mom. That's your matriarch. You respect her, you uplift her, you make her name great. Same thing with your father. You don't go out and, give him a noogie. You know what I mean? You don't push him in the back and then say, ha ha, got you, wet willy. You know what I mean? That's your dad. You treat him with respect. You're not going to get up and push him in the back, give him a wet willy, steal his satchel of money off his pocket and then laugh at it while you run away. You're going to treat him with dignity and respect. So I can see that being both cases, that it really doesn't matter if there's a status difference. It's how do you handle the relationship appropriately? As a son, he didn't do his job. And that was the moral failure. That was the physical failure there. And I think that's more what we're trying to harp on here, is not so much of who and what and how and when. It was a failure on multiple levels. And it was allowed, like Joe said earlier, to become sin that then turned into, then it was an action. Right. So if he would have, whether she's the concubine, the wife, whether that's the exact same word in the Hebrew or the Greek, and we're trying to, split olives with our English, you know, we have what we have in front of us is the best that we have, and you know, it doesn't give us a super duper clear answer, so we're gonna have to speculate a little bit. But generally, when you call somebody husband, that means you're a wife. So whatever status that she ultimately played in his life, she still was treated as a wife, and he still treated her as a wife. Maybe she was secondary because of, you know, he didn't marry her out of choice. She was given. So that's a different, you know, like forever you're like, oh, you're the given one, not the chosen one. Who knows how that played out back then. That's a whole different cultural aspect. But yeah, a failure on multiple levels by Mr. Rubin here.
Yeah, I don't want to kick this horse too many times, but I'll give another example of why I think it's like this that way. Is because you look at Abraham and Sarah. You know, when she gives him her handmaiden, gives her, you know, what was her name?
Hagar.
Hagar, that's right. When she gives that give her unto him, sorry, to have a child. Later, when that child's born, Sarah's the one that says to Abraham, hey, she got to go. And God says you need to listen to your wife, or it's okay to listen to her, send them on their way. So there is a point I'm trying to make of Sarah was the main lady, even though the other lady was technically a wife as well, and all that good stuff, and given as a concubine. There's still the main matriarch here that I think is what we see play out. That's why I think there's that language written in here for that. Still technically a wife, but I don't think it holds the same status as the first lady, so to speak.
So this is like an IRS issue, right? You know, only one of you is going to claim taxes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me go ahead and kick this dead horse too.
We're gonna have glue here in a minute.
I think this is a language thing here. I think the first part is pretty cut and dry. Don't lie with his father's wife, right?
Right.
Don't have physical relations. And then the second part, and should not uncover his father's skirt. Okay, so when you uncover something, you can now see everything that's there.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is all in the language that's what that is. We had this example, and I mean, goodness gracious, we had this example. I mean, you went down the rabbit hole explaining how Bathsheba, the whole deal, right? I think that's the point of it is once you uncover that, you're going to want to continue that until the deed is done and it becomes the bad thing. So I think that's what that is. It's don't even entertain the idea. Don't entertain the idea, because that's going to lead to uncovering. And once you uncover, it's going to lead to the deed being done, and you can't back out of that. And it's an abominable thing, and it's an undoable, whatever. Right. That's okay. That's where I'm going with it. And I'll drop it.
All right. Now we have glue.
It bonds us together.
Yes.
Ooh.
All right. And how about this right here? What about this part right below that, still in 10? It says, they shall surely die together. I can understand if that is an agreed upon situation happening, but in this situation, she wasn't aware. Does that mean that is this now a new standard for the woman as well? Hey, make sure you know who's coming up behind you kind of situation? Like, you're just as responsible in this as he is? Or is this, if you're both knowledgeable about what's going on here? What's your thoughts?
Kyle, to kind of give you a little bit of answer to that, I think we go back to chapter 22 of Deuteronomy. It does speak in there about if a woman cries out, that she would not be found guilty of this type of sin, of adultery or anything like that. So I think the fact that we have here in the story that it says at the end of verse 4, it says, Reuben was lying with her in bed, and she uncovered the border of her covering and seized him and cried out.
Yep.
And discovered it was Reuben. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. So I think that's why that's in play here, because she was not a willing participant in this.
Right. Very good. Very good. Definitely wanted to just clarify that.
Yeah.
For anybody who might be reading this and going, well, wait a minute, why would she be held guilty?
Yeah.
So good stuff.
Well, in that same section in Deuteronomy, it talks about stoning the two if they, are doing the deed and nobody's crying out, nobody's trying to do anything valid and on the up and up. Then it's like, yeah, then they both literally do die. So it's interesting that, like, here in this moment, you're getting the full story, and then later it's like, oh, by the way, that's actual rule. Like, you literally can't do that.
Right.
Yep. Absolutely.
So the angel wasn't lying.
There you go. What about in verse 11 over here? It says, and there shall be nothing unclean before our Elohim in the nation which he hath chosen for himself as a possession.
Mm.
Nothing unclean. That's a big deal, right?
Yep. Well, and again, in that verse, Kyle, he says right there in 12, it says, and again, it is written a second time.
And don't mess.
He's like, just in case you thought you missed something, let me make sure we're all on the same page.
Well, I think that's why we get the verses like "Be holy, for I am holy," and you're supposed to be a set apart people, and you're supposed to be wholly devoted to the Lord. It's because I can't let you be here otherwise. Especially when we're talking New Jerusalem, when the whole thing is getting the big reset kind of deal, and Satan's locked away. It's like, oh, in this moment, for sure, if you made it into the kingdom, you don't get to do none of this. This is not even on the table anymore. So why not start walking and acting that out? My son, I sent to you, Yeshua didn't do any sin, and he was clean. He was able to enter. Why don't you be like him? Then you can enter.
Yep.
And don't do this stuff.
and look, it's not even, we know from reading the Torah, it's not even an act of these things. It's everything. It's a physical cleanliness. Again, God said, hey, when you go to the bathroom, go outside the camp, carry your shovel. He said, and bury it, because he says, I walk in the midst of your camp. So this isn't even as far. I mean, it includes the sin that people are committing, the actual act of sin. But he's also saying, hey, keep the place clean. Yeah. I don't want to walk around all this mess. I'm in your midst. So there is a physical part of this cleanliness as much as there's a spiritual side to it. All right, guys, let's jump into 13.
So be it.
So be it. So be it. It says, and do thou, Moses, command the children of Israel that they observe this word, for it is in a punishment of death, and it is unclean, and there is no atonement forever to atone for the man who hath committed this, but he is to be put to death and slain and stoned with stones and rooted out from the midst of the people of our Elohim. For to no man who doeth so in Israel is it permitted to remain alive a single day on the earth, for he is abominable and unclean. And let them not say to Reuben was granted life and forgiveness after he had lain with his father's concubine, and to her also, though she had a husband, and her husband Jacob, his father, was still alive. For this until that time there had not been revealed the ordinance and judgment and law in its completeness for all, but in thy days it hath been revealed as a law of seasons of days, and an everlasting law for the everlasting generations. And for this law there is no consummation of days, and no atonement for it, but they must both be rooted out in the midst of the nation. And on the day whereon they committed it, they shall slay them. And do thou, Moses, write it down, and for Israel, that they may observe it and do according to these words, and do not commit a sin unto death. For Yahuwah our Elohim is judge, who respecteth not persons, and accepteth not gifts. And tell them these words of the covenant, that they may hear and observe, and be on their guard with respect to them, and not be destroyed and rooted out of the land. For an uncleanness and an abomination and a contamination and a pollution are all they who committed on the earth before our Elohim. And there is no greater sin than the fornication which they commit on earth. For Israel is a holy nation unto Yahuwah its Elohim, and a nation of inheritance, and a priestly and royal nation, and for his own possession. And there shall no such uncleanness appear in the midst of the holy nation. Woo!
Yeah. Point I want to bring up in 16, it says, for until that time there had not been revealed the ordinance and judgment and law in its completeness. In other words, it hadn't been revealed, but it was already established. Correct. Right?
Yep.
And I think when we go back up here to verse 12, it says, and again, it is written a second time.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, this was already written down. That's why this is being written down a second time, because this is being written down as saying, okay, this has been given. It has been revealed now at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, and I love these little, they're breaking the fourth wall or whatever you call it. These little moments where they're like, "Oh, and by the way, Moses," so we're in the middle of a story with Jacob and Reuben and all these people. We're like, "Oh, this is old history," and then it's like a quick snapshot. All right, let's go back from the story for a second and go back to real life. All right, Moses, we're still on Mount Sinai. By the way, I need you to tell. Remember how I said this sin is crazy bad, and you got to get stoned with stones and be super dead. Yeah, I'm gonna need to take a little quick break from writing, and I need you to you tell these people out here this exact same message, or else the same situation will befall them, and they don't even get to live for another day. You don't wait and go to the courts. You don't have this long drawn out proceeding. They don't get to live another day because of this action. So it's always fun for me to watch these little breaks in the story where the angel of the presence is like, by the way, Moses, I need to talk to you for a second. Stop writing and listen to me. Go talk to the people and tell them this stuff. And I'm not saying that Moses stopped and talked to him, but he knew how important this was, that it was a whole stop in the story to make sure you better tell your people, don't mess this up. These are one of them. This is up there. This is a really, really, there's no atonement for this. There's no going back on this one. If you mess this one up, you're dead. And that's the end of the story. Don't ask any questions. Don't ask for forgiveness. You messed up. That's a weird kind of way to look at it. But the angel's like, by the way, I'm pausing to make sure you heard 100% what I'm saying. Like, if you didn't gather that from the story, this is what the meaning behind all of this is.
yep. And in verse 13, I think this is pretty neat the way that this is phrased here. We have some distinction here of what's going on. It says, put to death and slain and stoned with stones and rooted out. So I think there's a distinction here that we need to make, and that is, whose place is it to put someone to death? Is this God's place or is this our place? And I think what this is saying is, this is up to you, my people. If you see this happen, this is up to you to take care of this issue, and I'll take care of this issue. So we have put to death by who? Slain with your hands. How are you going to do it? Stoned with stones, and they'll be rooted out. I'll handle that part. That's kind of the way I see that. Y'all have any additional thoughts on that?
No, thank you. Thank you.
No.
Hit it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did I get the little gold star?
Oh, yeah.
The little one. This has to be about that big.
Oh,
Well, I kind of want to go back to Kyle's good points there, brother. Back to 12, where it says, "Cursed be he who lieth with the wife of his father." We go, and I know Noah is one of them stories where we can look at it a lot of different ways when he talks about uncovering his father's nakedness and stuff. And this is going back to Genesis chapter 9. So, but one of the things that comes out of this, regardless if it was literally, physically seeing his father laying there drunken, naked, or if he uncovered his father's nakedness, and a lot of times that's a term used in the Bible for saying that he did something inappropriate with his mother. Regardless, we see that a curse comes about from this. So it says in verse 24 of chapter 9, it says, when Noah awoke from his wine and knew what his youngest son had done to him, he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall be to his brothers." So there was a curse spoken over this. There was a uncovering of nakedness. Again, whether it was Noah himself or the wife, whatever it was, this was still very improper. It was this, and especially when he goes out and he tells his two brothers about it. Like, what are you bragging about, bro? Like, this is getting kind of weird here.
right.
But we see, backing up with what verse 12 of Jubilees chapter 33 says, it says, "And again it is written a second time, cursed he be." And so we see that Noah gives a curse unto the grandson, Canaan. Now, why I didn't go to the actual son, I don't know. I guess a lot of speculation on that. But we see that a curse is given at this moment. So it's not a good thing whatsoever.
Well, and I kind of want to ask the dumb question that I'm sure all you guys know the answer, but I just wanted to do it for the sake of having it recorded and we can all, talk about it and make sure. But so we're saying here that when you do this act, like Joe brought up earlier, if you cry out, then you're proving your innocence essentially in that moment, because you have to have the ability to not be your fault. Right? You can't blame the woman when she didn't have a choice in the matter, or she was unaware. So, I mean, I love that the scripture gives us that information, so we're not just out here, shaming everybody, kind of like Yeshua with the woman. He's like, hey, go and sin no more. Where's your accuser, kind of deal. So we get that opportunity for restoration, especially in a bad situation. But here, both of them don't die. I mean, is that a correct statement, that they both lived more than one day after this event? So, and I wanted everybody to make sure, this is like, they both die and then they're not dead. So what's going on here? And I think it's interesting as we read verse 15, it says, and let them not say, so don't go about here saying this stuff, that Reuben was granted life and forgiveness after he had lain with his father's concubine, and to her also, though she had a husband and her husband was Jacob, his father was still alive. So it's kind of giving you the, listen, I don't need you going out here and using this as an example of, oh, well, Reuben was good. Well, she was good. So then what's the big deal? So I definitely wanted to not stress it, but make sure that it's clear cut of what's going on here. They both did it. They were both in the situation. The curse for this, or the result of this, like Kyle said, is death, stoned, slain, rooted, all that stuff. You're out of here. So then, well, what's the big deal? This is that taking scripture out of context. This is cherry picking. You could go read the one verse. Well, they didn't die the next day. So, hey, we're good. Let's go try it and see what happens.
Right.
Let's not try it. And let's not see what happens.
Out for you.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to be super uber clear that even 15 is like, let's not say. Do not do the thing that you're thinking in your brain. Well, maybe there's no, there's not.
Well, that with that, Jonathan, verse 16 clears that up. Why? It says right there, it says, for until that time there had not been revealed the ordinance and judgment and law in its completeness. So they were kind of like grandfathered in under the old fact that, hey, this wasn't fully implemented yet.
Right.
So it says, for it says, but in thy days it has been revealed as a law of seasons and of days, and an everlasting law for the everlasting generations. And right there, that little side note right there, Kyle says, where there is no law, there is no transgression.
Romans 4:15.
And that's exactly what Paul says. Doesn't he? Paul says, I wouldn't even knew what sin was except for the Torah. He says, unless we are told, we don't know. Hey, but by the way, what they did was wrong, right, Jonathan? But the completeness of this law was not in full effect yet. So don't go around, like you just said, don't go around saying, well, they did it and they didn't die.
Right.
Because 16 gives us the full answer of why they didn't die.
Yeah, and Joe, I definitely want to jump on that statement, because what we're seeing here is, and this is Jonathan's brain coming out. So this isn't written down anywhere. But I think God, in his ultimate wisdom, the Father in heaven, is looking down and saying, I created these humans after my own image, after my own likeness. They have the knowledge of good and evil. I think they can handle this. I believe that they're going to go into the world and they're going to use common sense and logic and say, this is the person who's counted as a mother to me, who I respect, love, and cherish, not someone that I sleep with and try to have relations with. There shouldn't be even an option. The human brain shouldn't go that way, because we're created in his image and in his likeness. So I think God in his way is like, I'm not going to give you 75,000 rules, because then I'm giving you an option that you maybe didn't even know existed. Like, why give someone the rule to say don't sleep with one of your father's wives if it should never really be an option? And then if you put the rule on paper, you're like, wait, so it's possible to sleep with my father's wife? I would have never even considered it. So, sometimes when we have rules, we talk about like anarchists and stuff like that, and like kids, as soon as you give them a rule, they find a way to break it. You give them an inch, they take a mile. So I wonder if in God's infinite wisdom was, I could have given you all the rules day one, but then you would have known the things that I don't like. And because Satan is in the world, he would have then forced you to, or not forced, he would have then tempted you to do the things that I'm telling you not to do. And, as a human being, we should be above that. As a human being, we should know there's certain things we shouldn't do. Like Cain and Abel, he's like, I didn't need to tell you not to murder. That's an alive human. Why would you kill an alive human? He's got the ruach in him. He's got the spirit in him. Why would you unalive him? That's not how we do stuff. What is going on with you? Okay, hey, new rule, don't kill people. What is going on? Because we should be above that. And I think, if we really go down the road of, I have the Holy Spirit in me, I'm one of God's people, there's certain things that, like, really unfortunately shouldn't be a part of our life and are part of our human experience. But because sin has entered in the world, and because there's evil in the world, the inclinations of the mind goes into craziness, and I think that's why we see this come in. He's like, I didn't need to give you this rule. You definitely should have never did this. This shouldn't even have been on the option table. But now that it is, and apparently somebody's going to try to do it again later, let's make the official rule. It's always been a rule, but since you need it written down because you're dumb, here you go.
All right. So go ahead, Jim.
I said, so the moral of the story is don't be dumb.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very, very much so.
Okay. So what about in 19? All this distinction we have here: uncleanness, abomination, contamination, pollution.
That's a few of them words.
That's yeah. All I'm seeing is what was that thing you grew up watching, Jonathan? Captain what?
Captain Planet.
Captain Planet right there. Uncleanness, abomination, contamination, and pollution.
So we've got uncleanness, so that's not good. Right. Uncleanness is going to contaminate, meaning it's going to spread, and pollute means it's going to bring about death. Mm-hmm. Right? And all of that is seen as an abomination. So very interesting, those words that were used there. And how about this in verse 20? This kind of I don't know. It's, why do you think this is something that's being described as there is no greater sin than the fornication which they commit on the earth? Why is this the thing that's considered no greater sin?
Well, I'll give you my initial take on it. Is when we look at the relationship with the Father, when we look at the covenant that Israel makes with the Father at the Mount Sinai, when you look at all these scenarios, it always says that they are in adultery, or that they've done wrong in that covenant. And so he's saying I think what he's really getting at is the heart of covenant. Whenever we say yes, that means yes. Whenever you agree to this, you agree to that. So fornication means stepping out, going outside of what is the proper way and proper bounds, proper limits of the relationship. So as a people group, we can go outside of the relationship with God. And then as a married couple, and as, sons, daughters, friends, there's covenants in those relationships. Like all the men on here, we have certain expectations from each other, certain boundaries we would never cross, because that's the right way to do life. And I think that, if one of us were to cross one of those boundaries, that would sever the relationship or severely hurt it. And I think with God, he's saying any kind of fornication, any kind of adultery, any kind of situation that you're stepping out of the proper covenant lifestyle, that's an abomination. That means you don't have any regards to the way that the things are created and the way things are meant to be. And you're going against the natural order of the world.
I think also, it's one of those things where it's one of those sins that you can, that people think that they get away with, right? Like it's a private sin a lot of times in a lot of situations. And because of that, it can become something that becomes a habit, becomes part of your life. And if you've made compromise in this area of your life and you've been able to get away with it so long, it just kind of becomes one of those habits where it's okay. It just seems like it's one of those things that's going to draw you further and further and further away from the ways of the Most High, and to where nothing is sacred anymore, nothing is holy anymore, and then you're completely lost. So, just a thought.
Yeah.
And I think too, Kyle, when we go into that frame of thought, and in 20, he's given the greater reason why. He's like, hey, look. He says, for Israel is a holy nation unto Yahuwah, its Elohim. He's like, you are carriers of my name. Right. You can't be out there doing this stuff. You can't. This is not a good look. This cannot be in the camp, especially this particular type of sin, because it's not good at all. And it goes back to the uncleanness, abomination, contamination, pollution. How are you supposed to be that light up on the hill? You can't be. With all the stuff that's going on. He's like, you carry my name. You are, it says right there, in a nation of inheritance. And he says, in a priestly and royal nation for his own possession. He says, you belong to me. He says, I can't, I'm supposed to be the God for everybody else too. But I need someone out there who's going to represent me, who's not going to profane my name. And you can't be doing these things. You're profane. And matter of fact, you have an inheritance. No one else on this entire place, whether it's flat around or concave or whichever way you want to spin it or don't spin it, He's saying no one else can claim an inheritance. Think about it. No one else in this entire world can claim an inheritance like you have. No one else has a God who has extended his hand and drew you out of Egypt and done all the things I've done for you. There's no other God out there like me. He says, so we can't have this. So when you go out there, you represent me. And the nations are looking at you. They're wanting, what I want them to see is blessed and highly favored, right? So that they are jealous of what you have. You know, there was a point, help me out with this, guys. Was it, I think it was Paul with one of his letters, and there was some stuff going on inside the congregation similar to this.
I think it was Corinthians.
How was that?
I think it was the Corinthians.
The Corinthians, yeah. And he makes a statement. He says, you know what? Even the pagans out there, they're looking at you going, man, I wouldn't even have done that. That's how bad it was inside inside that place.
Right.
Where the pagans are going, hey, I wouldn't have done that. I don't know. Just that's bad.
Right.
So he said, hey, man, you're supposed to be a representation of me, a royal priesthood who has an inheritance. But people see you and they see that this land is blessed. Why is your land blessed? Well, it was given to us by our Yahuwah. Why did he do that for? Because we are his. We belong to him. Well, I want some of that too. Well, let me tell you how. And, you know, so anyway, that's where I think that this is so, guys, like, we're going to nip this right here. We're going to write it down twice. And we're going to make sure it's on the heavenly tables. We're going to make sure you're going to get this. And by the way, if you do this, you're gone. You cannot be here to represent me. You cannot carry my name. You're rooted out, period.
Right. And Joe, I think you hit it on the spearhead. And what I mean by that is, you know, we see this example played out very clearly, very concisely, and a very positive result from it. You know, we look at and say with Phineas in the Old Testament, where he goes and drives the spear. That's why the joke came in. He drove the spear through the two people outside of the tabernacle. And you're like, oh, no, man, this is like a priest dude and he's killing people. This has to be bad. And then what happens? God turns around and is like, covenant of peace. You're one of my main guys, and you're going to be immortalized for this story. You're going to be listed as one of the thumbs up people in the whole Bible narrative. There's not a lot of people in the Old Testament that gets the thumbs up treatment. He's one of the guys that gets the thumbs up treatment. And what is it about? Fornication, adultery, nonsense stuff going on in the sexual arena, in a place that it shouldn't have happened, at a time it shouldn't have happened, and in a place that it shouldn't have happened. And Phineas went in there and said, execute judgment right now, solve the problem, get it out of here. And God said, yep, I don't want this to happen. I wish it didn't happen, but since it has, by all means. And that's such a weird story, because we try to, you put us in today's standard. And he's like, what if he's like, hey, by the way, Jonathan, Kyle, Joe, you guys online, be a Phineas today. Would there be any humans left? You know what I mean? Like, it's just such a weird scenario. But God was like super thumbs up on that, because you don't play around with that kind of stuff. And it's because he says, I am in your midst. I'm going to be there with you. You're a holy nation. And when I'm in your presence, when the ark is here, the cloud is here, don't bring that anywhere near, because you get
right.
And think about this too with that story. If Phineas doesn't act out on this is like before not just a few people. This is in front of a lot of people. If Phineas doesn't act out on this is about to break out. I promise you. This is going to, because he was actually, what was happening is this guy was with someone from another nation. So now we got this mixing going on. So it's even a worse situation. It's getting worse. So Phineas is like, you know what? I mean, for all we knew, God was about to go, I had enough. I'm sending another plague. I'm sending another angel. I'm going to do this. And Phineas is like acting out, going, no, we're stopping this right now. As a matter of fact, this is going to be a witness to the rest of you out there who even think about it. Don't even think about coming near this tabernacle and doing this, or you're going to get the same treatment as they got. That's why God's like, hey, I'm giving you that title of what is it, righteous of peace. And it's like, because you just created peace in a situation that was about to go really sideways for the rest of the camp. Because I was about to unleash something. this is my thought. God's like, I'm about to unleash another spanking, but you stopped it, and then therefore,
well, I already tried fiery snakes. You want to try something else? I can keep going. You guys don't learn your lesson.
No, thank you.
Pass.
Hard pass.
So sometimes those things got to be done, and All right, guys, let's pick it back up in verse 21. In the 3rd year of the 6th week, Jacob and all his sons went and dwelt in the house of Abraham near Isaac his father and Rebekah his mother. And these were the names of the sons of Jacob, the firstborn Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, the sons of Leah, and the sons of Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin, and the sons of Bilhah, Dan and Naphtali, and the sons of Zilpah, Gad and Asher, and Dinah the daughter of Leah, and the only daughter of Jacob. And they came and bowed themselves to Isaac and Rebekah. And when they saw them, they blessed Jacob and all his sons. And Isaac rejoiced exceedingly, for he saw the sons of Jacob, his younger son, and he blessed them.
Oh, so Joe, that was really cool. And I think what's even interesting about this, because it seems like, oh, we just get a list of names, okay, yada yada, and then we're wrapping this chapter up. But in reality, I think there's a detail in here, and there's some information that we kind of may not have picked up on. So when Jacob first comes back and sees his dad and his mom, he brings who? Only Levi and Judah. And they say, hey, surely these are the grandkids. Surely they belong to you. Well, now we're getting the whole story. Now Jacob's bringing the whole camp with him. He's like, hey, mom and dad, by the way, it wasn't just the 2 sons. Those are the ones that I brought. Those are the 2 that you blessed. That was the king, the priest. That's the stuff that we were really getting into. Unfortunately, in between now and then, there was some crazy stuff that happened. We were at Sukkot. She died. Reuben had a mistake along the way. But nevertheless, we're all here now. I'm introducing you to my whole family unit. I want you to see all of us. And so with Isaac and Rebecca, they're saying, okay, I saw Levi. Cool, man. I saw Judah. Awesome. But now I get to see my youngest kids and all of his children. You know, they've seen Esau. Esau's been around. He's been a little bit of a thorn in their side, you know, for better or for worse. He's been there. But Jacob's finally come back, and they're seeing the fullness. They're seeing the fruit of all the labors of Jacob. He went up to Laban, spent all that time there, got all the goats, got the 4 wives, had all the children. And this is their first time reuniting as one big giant family. And I think that that's why we get that little intro, the little insert of the story with Moses, where he's like, hey, by the way, command all the people, because we want it to be a successful family unit. We want Israel to be that city on a hill. So go command these people, because here's the story. It's about to get good again. There's going to be a lot more stuff. We're seeing the 12 tribes. Guess who you are? Guess who all these people down here are? Besides the sojourners and the ones that were added to them, they're all part of the 12 tribes. These are going to be the 12 gates. This is something that's going to go forward into the future forever. And Isaac and Rebekah, before they died, got to see a part of that. They got to be a part of that story and see the fullness of the nation of Israel and its beginnings.
Amen. And with that, guys, we will see you next time for chapter 34 in the book of Jubilees. God bless.
Shalom.
Ciao.
It says, and Jacob went out and dwelt to the south of Magda Lareth, and he went into his father. What?
Magna Lareth?
Magda Lareth. What does it matter? I don't care. And she laminated.